Conversation now. Joining us is the Director of Research at the Center for Immigration Studies, Stephen Camarota. Steve, we appreciate your time. You heard and maybe you saw that Rebel pundit video, Telemundo staging a scene at one of the Trump protests. What is your take on all that?
Well, unfortunately, people who do monitor Spanish language media in the United States say that it does tend to be somewhat biased, especially whenever an issue of immigration comes up. They don't, for example, ever talk to Hispanic Americans who have concerns about legal immigration or illegal immigration, job competition, overcrowded schools. These are just not issues they ever discuss. And generally, they always try to put illegal immigration in the most sympathetic light. Now, that may reflect a lot of what their listeners and viewers think, but clearly they do not reflect the diversity that we see in public opinion polling in that community.
Let us go to the phones where there certainly is a diversity of opinion at 1-877-Newsmax from Newcastle, Ohio. Here is Jim. Jim, you're live with JD and Stephen Camarota.
Okay, JD. Since we're talking about the protesters, I don't know why we're dignifying them or calling them protesters. Why don't we call them what they are? Paid Nazi thugs, because they're doing the same thing that the Nazis did in Germany in the 1930s.
Well, I'll call them rioters, because anytime, just a word, and I appreciate your opinion, I don't take issue with the fact you feel strongly, but anytime you compare anybody in the streets of the United States to Nazis, it's a non-starter. Are they agitators? Are they rioters even? Yeah, they can be. They're certainly not high-minded. But go ahead and make your point very quickly, Jim, about 30 seconds.
Okay, they're paid thugs anyway. Yeah, I'm all for Trump building that wall to keep the illegal aliens out. And it seems like, what I hear on your network, that a lot of the legal aliens are in favor of that too, so...
Well, yeah, the whole thing is there is legal immigration, and it's something Stephen touched on, Jim, what I call the myth of the monolith. The notion that if you have a Hispanic last name, you're instantly for open borders and for illegals coming into the country. Nothing could be further from the truth, as we will continue to talk about this following the break. Stephen Camarota, I want you to stay right where you are, and those of you watching at home, we want you to stay where you are, but pick up your telephone, call us with your comments at 1-877-Newsmax. That's 1-877-639-7629. More of your calls and more with Stephen as our coverage of the border continues on Newsmax TV.
We're going to have a strong border, and we're going to have a wall, and we are going to have a wall. And you know who is going to pay for the wall? Who?
Donald Trump on the stump last night in California's capital city, Sacramento. Again, his rallying cry that there will be a border wall and Mexico will pay for it. There's no doubting his campaign has brought the issue of illegal immigration back to the forefront of our political discussion. And now a new report by the Center for Immigration Studies finds that since 2014, 3.1 million newcomers, both legal and illegal immigrants, have settled in the United States. Take a look at this, and you'll see it on the graph here. The fact is, we have not seen. Actually, that is another article we're going to go to a bit later, but come back and I will tell you that we haven't seen numbers this high since 2000 and 2001. So what is going on here? Let's talk to the guy who helped to assemble those numbers by researching what goes on with Census Department figures. He's the Director of Research at the Center for Immigration Studies, Stephen Camarota. So, Stephen, you're the guy, I assume, with your team sat down and crunched the numbers. We haven't seen this in 15 years. Your reaction to what you found?
Right. Well, what we found is it looks like we're hitting the all-time high again, which we hit before in about 2000. That is 1.5, 1.6 million new legal and illegal immigrants are settling in the country each year. And that doesn't count the ones that maybe the Census Bureau missed. So the number's probably higher. Of that total, about a third is illegal. So we're looking at 500,000 to 600,000 new illegal immigrants coming into the United States and about 1 million new legal immigrants. Now, mind you, and this is very important, given what Trump always says, it is probably the case that more than half of those illegal immigrants did not sneak into the United States, but rather arrived legally on a temporary visa, a tourist visa, a business traveler, that sort of thing, and just never went home. Others have slipped across the border, and a very large percent actually were stopped by the Border Patrol. They turned themselves in many cases, but due to policies of the Obama administration, particularly if they're not from Mexico, particularly if they have a child, anyone under the age of 18 with them, they release them into the United States, give them a court date, which of course they don't show up for, and they just join the illegal population. So it's very important to understand that a fence or a wall can be helpful. But what these numbers really show is all the people who are overstaying temporary visas and all the people that get stopped at the border and then they let in. So the wall, we shouldn't overemphasize the importance, though it can play a constructive role.
Well, and it is important to understand this, and I think sometimes in this debate, Stephen, people, and especially a lot of the open borders advocates, they say, gee, most of the people come in here, they come in here on visas and overstay. That in no way absolves those who come across the border illegally, and you have to do something to have a fence, to have a wall. My goodness, we understand the president, it wants to raise the height of the wall at 1600 Pennsylvania Avenue, given some difficulties there. Let's get back to the phones, and joining us now at 1-877-Newsmax from Ontario, California. Phil is on the phone. Phil, what's on your mind?
Well, I just wanted to talk a little bit about the media, how they're staging stuff with the flags, and, you know, they're making this whole situation and blowing it up and making the American people believe that excuse me, I'm Mexican. Okay, I'm born and raised here in America. I'm an American citizen, and I love it here. Now, they got all these people out there. They're making this protest for Donald Trump look like Donald Trump's actually doing something bad, when actually in reality, I think he's doing something good, because everybody's talking about the border like you just were. And if you want to get technical, as far as the corporation goes, the big corporation, which is the U.S. corporation, they're talking about illegal citizens coming over here, which in reality, the real problem is the drugs. And then the corporations, they go raid all these places and take the money. What is the federal government doing with the money? You know, I understand there's a problem with the border, and I think they should put up a wall.
Well, and see, Phil, again, you are providing ample evidence, as you point out, your own heritage, of Mexican heritage, but born and raised in the United States, and you want to see illegal immigration ended. And we certainly acknowledge what Stephen has to say about visa overstays and, in general, a lack of enforcement. Let me talk to you about that, Stephen, for just a second. We've had the episode of a federal judge basically slapping down the Justice Department, saying that lawyers should get ethical training because they are ignoring the judge's orders. The DOJ comes back and basically says they're going to ignore those orders for all intents and purposes. Is Mr. Obama, in his campaign to profoundly change the United States, ignoring the ruling of federal judges and is just full speed ahead for anybody who wants to come in here?
Well, the issue that you're talking about is basically several states rose up and said, look, the administration's not enforcing the law. It can't pass this ruling or this administrative action that basically lets most illegal immigrants stay and gives them work authorization. This one was called DAP, a Deferred Action for Parents of Americans, is what it was called. So if you have a U.S.-born kid, we're not only not going to deport you, but if these are illegal immigrants, we're not going to deport you, and we're going to give you work authorization, social security numbers, driver's license. A judge is looking at whether that's legal. It looks like what the president is doing is purposely ignoring laws, which he's not supposed to do. But what happened was the administration kept legalizing folks anyway after the judge said, no, you can't do that until I figure out and sort through this and say whether it's legal. And they basically said, well, okay, we're sorry. So they lied to him there. Then he wants more information from them, and they're not cooperating with that. So not only are they doing something extremely questionable constitutionally, which is not enforcing the law purposefully as a matter of policy, but then when the judge tries to sort things out and figure out what's going on, essentially what they're doing is prevaricating and mistreating him, or deceiving him, I should say. And so that's what he's reacting to.
Yeah,
so
and I understand him reacting, but the fact that the president and his administration seems to be willingly, knowingly breaking the law is very disturbing. Tell you what, let's take another phone call from Middletown, Ohio. This is Craig tonight on Newsmax Prime. Hiya, Craig.
Hello. Enjoy your show.
Thank you, sir.
What? Now, my question is, the way the unemployment and the rate of people that is on welfare in the United States today, and until they can fix the problem with the immigration, legal immigration, why don't they stop it completely?
Yeah,
until they can fix the problem.
Exactly.
Get them back to work. And then if there's jobs here and we need workers, then let them come over like they used to.
Well, we ought to do it. We ought to do it legally. But I'm with you. There should be a moratorium until we get this thing straightened out for everybody. Stephen, about 15 seconds to react to that idea.
Look, we have a record number of working age people not working, and most people who come in do so legally and we have not given any consideration of the impact on those Americans who don't have jobs. So the listener's got a point. Maybe we should bring those numbers down. I think we should, until we actually get most Americans back to work. But unfortunately, that's not what we're doing. We're admitting record numbers of legal immigrants, and illegal immigration on top of that is surging.
Stephen Camarota from the Center for Immigration Studies. You know whereof you study, whereof you speak. Stephen, we thank you very much for your time tonight on Newsmax Prime.
Thanks for having me.
Now, we will continue to monitor this situation, but before we leave, it's time for the way you see it. Your comments via social media, and we got a comment via email that we want to share, a name that may be familiar to you, Faye. She called in last night, and she wrote, following her phone call, she wrote to me, "Today, for the first time, I called and got through to your program and froze when it was my turn to speak. I frankly could not think of what it was I'd planned to say. Sorry for my inability to speak in a manner more appropriate for such a fine show as yours." Faye, thank you for the compliment, but let me reassure you, from time to time, even the most loquacious among us come up short or maybe forget what we have to say, but you call back and keep watching. That'll do it for tonight. Stay brave, stay free, stay tuned.